Have you ever wondered why some people seem to end up in toxic relationships over and over again? Well, it could be due to something called trauma bonds. But what is a trauma bond exactly, and do you suffer from these? Is trauma bonding where two people go through something bad together and then they fall in love with one another? No, not necessarily. Trauma bonding is a term that's used for falling in love with someone that's not actually good for you, who's bad for you, toxic for you, abusive toward you. That isn't true love. True love needs to be beneficial for both parties. So there needs to be that mutual benefit. If someone you're in love with is actually bad for you, then it's not mutually beneficial. And so since it's to your detriment, psychologists call this a trauma bond. So a trauma bond is where you love someone or like someone that is actually bad for you. To understand this better, picture yourself being kidnapped by someone who's bigger and stronger than you. In order to survive, we have fight, flight, freeze, and fawn. But you may recognize you can't fight back in this situation because you're not big enough. They may have you trapped so you can't run away. Freeze isn't a good option because maybe they're asking you to engage. And so you may come up with the fawn response, which is an intuitive way of surviving by endearing yourself to the perpetrator. So you have a kidnapper or an abuser and you're afraid for your life. But how you come up with surviving is to make them feel good toward you. And so you start to develop good feelings toward them because you start to change the way you look at them. You look at them as your way of surviving, as your ticket out. You look at them as a human being. You start analyzing what some of their flaws are, what their needs are, what their wants are. You start to see the humanity in them. You start to project. And empathy is a projection. So when you start giving them empathy, you're projecting onto them good feelings or feelings like yours. And so you start saying, oh, maybe they have motives like mine. Maybe they're motivated by love for their family. Maybe this person cares about me because I care for people, even if I were to kidnap them. And you go on with projecting your empathy onto them, projecting your goodness, your good intentions and good thoughts onto them so that you start to see them as being a being like you, someone who's loving, caring, affectionate, responsible, accountable, and all of this. And meanwhile, all of that may not be true about the individual. They might not actually be a good person. In this way, you can have an abuser in your life, a prison warden in your life, like your mom or your dad or a boyfriend, girlfriend, and you're just staying trapped in this relationship where it's not good for you, but you feel all these feelings of affection toward this person. That is a trauma bond. It's the same as Stockholm Syndrome, which is based on actual situations where there was hostages, and then the hostages were kept for so long that they started to feel affection toward their kidnapper. And so when the police come in to arrest the kidnapper, the hostages are pleading on behalf of the kidnapper. Don't hurt him, don't kill him. You got to understand it's not his fault. Please don't be mad. Please, all that. That is trauma bonding, Stockholm Syndrome. So the reason why you or someone you know keeps getting into toxic relationships is because they keep projecting their empathy and projecting all these good qualities on a person that is not necessarily good for them. They may go into the situation, their relationships with limerence, not really knowing the person, and have that crush on them. That's not really true love from the beginning. They're basing their relationship with the person on their idealization of the person, and then they've got this person up on this pedestal, and now they just kind of keep those good feelings going. Meanwhile, the relationship itself is degrading as this evil person or the perpetrator learns more and more what they can get away with and how they can continue to hurt, harm, gaslight, and really do the least for you or the person who keeps getting into toxic relationships. If you like to end the cycle of getting into toxic relationships, you need to stop being avoidant. This whole concept of, well, I can't trust anyone, or I can't trust myself, so I'll just avoid all guys or all gals, is not going to work. Ultimately, it's going to put you back into more toxic relationships because it just puts you in a state of desperation. And then the people who are going to come after you when you're being avoidant are the predators. And meanwhile, all the healthy people would be like, oh, it seems like they need space. I'm not going to continue to push and pursue this relationship. So stop being avoidant. Instead, you want to do the opposite and be very open to connections and relationships. Show trust to other people and trust to yourself. And trust that you have the ability to recognize if something is unhealthy. And it's easier to recognize that when you have lots of relationships with people that are platonic. So you can start to see who's manifesting unhealthy behavior as compared to other people in your life. So that's one thing, is stop being avoidant. Number two, it's not about recognizing the red flags, although it's very helpful to know what the qualities of a narcissist are. The key is to recognize how to test people in your life. And the way that you test them is by being very much yourself, very much authentic, unapologetically authentic. And that involves asserting yourself, advocating for yourself, setting good boundaries. If you're doing that, it's going to expose the narcissists, the abusers, the predators in your life. Why? Because they do not like boundaries. And so they might pretend for a while that they like the boundaries. They might act for a while like they like the boundaries, but they cannot keep it up. It's exhausting. The boundaries destroy their plans, their games. And so if you're highly assertive, very authentic, very well boundaried, the only people who can survive that are the people who are authentically well suited and well matched for you. And you will finally stop being in toxic relationships. Don't mask up. Don't be fake. Stop people pleasing. Start being yourself, even if that means that people's feelings are going to get hurt. Stop saving everyone.